Ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you something, brother.
It's Talk Wrestling Live with Felix the Cat Katlovski
and Gemini Joe.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
We heard rumbling. No, we heard rumors. Homicide. Conan. 5150 at LAX.
Listen live on Mondays at 4 p.m. on NorthCoastUnderground.com.
and follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
I'm in no mood for your wisecrack. Let's get it on.
Hey wrestling fans, this is Felix The Cat Katlovski, and this is another episode of Talk Wrestling Live. Thanks for joining us on NorthCoastUnderground.com, where the underground starts with you. And we're going to be talking about Impact Wrestling, where we will be recapping everything that's going on with that product. So without further ado, let's start out with Fear After Dark.
Are you scared? It's time for Fear After Dark.
Thought this was fun and games.
Fear is a funny thing.
En cero, miedo.
Fear was meant for the art of survival. I am the new beginning.
Because we are for Ohio. By Ohio. Because we are Ohio versus everything.
I'm better than every single one in that locker room. Tessa Blanchard is undeniable.
I'm not a man. I'm a machine.
Hey fans, so this is Fear After Dark, and this is Felix The Cat Katlovski, and we are recapping what went down on Impact Wrestling from last week on May 3rd. And we'll also talk a little bit about what happened at Sunday Special from Impact Plus. We'll talk a little bit about it. I don't want to talk too much about it because I haven't even seen it, so I don't want to spoil it for myself. So coming back to Impact Wrestling after Rebellion, we do have new champions. Brian Cage is now your new Impact Wrestling World Champion after defeating Johnny Impact, which was overseen by special guest referee Lance Storm. But before the Machine could celebrate his big win at Rebellion, Unbreakable Michael Elgin attacked Brian Cage as Elgin was hunting for gold. Also, LAX became your new Impact Wrestling Tag Team Champions after defeating the Lucha Bros. Starting off Impact, we kicked off the start of Impact Wrestling with an appearance by Michael Elgin. Elgin brought up how it is tradition for the new World Champion to celebrate the big win with the fans. But Elgin didn't let Brian Cage celebrate, as Big Mike took out Brian Cage, making sure that the Machine couldn't celebrate the very next night at the TV tapings. So Michael Elgin sent Brian Cage to the hospital after Rebellion, and Big Mike was embarrassed that his fellow Canadian fans were even cheering for Brian Cage and giving him support against Johnny Impact, the former Impact Wrestling champion. So Elgin said that Canadians are supposed to stick together to support their nation's heroes, like Wayne Gretzky, GSP George St. Pierre, and Big Mike Michael Elgin. So Elgin wanted Brian Cage to know that Big Mike left Japan to become the next Impact Wrestling World Champion. Now, after what he did at Rebellion, Michael Elgin feels that he is the only one most deserving of a title shot. Now, this sent out Johnny Impact, who just took out one Machine, and now Johnny wants to keep anyone else out of his way until he gets a rematch. Johnny was trying to act like he took out Brian Cage while it was Michael Elgin that interrupted an ambulance ride with Cage already on his way out. But Michael Elgin had to remind Johnny Impact that it was because of Big Mike's Elgin bomb that Cage was sent to the hospital, because before Elgin made his appearance, Brian Cage was still standing over Johnny Impact as the new Impact Wrestling World Champion. Still, at Impact Wrestling, the former champion is issued a rematch clause, but out of nowhere, Conan showed up. And since LAX and the Lucha Bros patched things up at Rebellion, Conan now represents Pentagon, and while Pentagon was briefly an Impact Wrestling World Champion, I don't think he ever received a rematch. So Conan came to make sure that Pentagon got his rematch. Now, Michael Elgin didn't want to hear that from Conan, so he put his hands on Conan, and this immediately sent out Pentagon. Pentagon and Elgin went at it, and security showed up. They were trying to hold them back, but Johnny Impact delivered a cheap shot to Michael Elgin while security was all over Elgin. Elgin started throwing security guards around the ring, and I think he even threw one of them out of the ring. So after that altercation, we now had our main event of the evening set. For the number one contendership for Brian Cage's Impact Wrestling World Championship, it would be Johnny Impact facing Pentagon and Michael Elgin in a three-way matchup. So we saw a replay of what really sent Brian Cage to the hospital, and that was from Johnny Impact's Spanish Fly from the ramp at Rebellion. Now there's still no word on when Brian Cage will be back. So we had our first match, and that would be Ace Austin taking on Petey Williams. Now Ace Austin, he came to the match pretty confident after getting his victory at Rebellion. Petey Williams showed his national pride to Canada, leading the fans to sing the national anthem when he stepped on Austin in the corner. And Austin used his playing cards to give Petey a paper cut between the fingers. That's got to be painful because when you have a paper cut between your fingers, any little movement just makes that cut even larger. I mean, it hurts either way. It's like you already got the paper cut, but you can still feel more pain afterwards. So after that, Petey executed a sharpshooter on Ace Austin, but Ace grabbed the ropes and the hold was broken. Austin hit the Faymaster from the top rope, and Ace finished off Petey Williams with his finishing move, the fold, to get the win after a 3 count. And we saw Rosemary somewhere backstage with Su Young's undead maid of honor with the collar around her neck in chains, with Rosemary leading the way. So OVE were with Sami Callihan, and one of the Chris brothers was wearing a Cleveland Indians jersey with a Chief Wahoo. Now, Callihan was mad that he lost to Rich Swann in his own specialty match, an OVE rules match, but Callahan's family was banned from ringside, or they'd all be fired. So Callihan wanted to see what would happen in an OVE rules match if his family did get together and if Rich Swann could form a 4-person team. It was time for Rosemary versus Kiera Hogan. Now, Rosemary brought the undead maid of honor to the ring, still wearing that collar and in chains. Rosemary chained the undead maid of honor to the turnbuckle post, kind of like a pet dog. If you're not able to stand there, maybe you put him on the post and like around the mailbox or something, the leash, and then you come back. I didn't know Impact Wrestling had a pet-friendly policy. You could bring your dog to Impact Wrestling, maybe. So earlier into the match, Kiera hit some stiff kicks into the jaw of Rosemary, and later, Kiera knocked Rosemary outside of the ring on the ramp. But as Kiera came for Rosemary, Kiera was tripped, and she started rolling to avoid Rosemary, but Kiera fell off the ramp. And just as Rosemary was setting her sights on Kiera, possibly looking to dive from the ramp onto Kiera below, Su Yung brought out her undead bridesmaids, and they all ganged up on Rosemary, bringing her to the ring. Now this caused the ref to stop the match and ring the bell. Su Yung then freed the undead maid of honor, and Kiera looked like she was going to get in the ring as she got closer to the ring apron, but Su Yung started hissing at her, and Kiera left Rosemary in the ring, still getting attacked by Su Yung, her maid of honor, and the undead bridesmaids. And that's when Su Yung hit the panic switch on Rosemary. Josh Matthews asked whether Kiera Hogan was frozen in fear or if she was having second thoughts and deciding not to help her friend Rosemary fight off Su Yung and her allies. So we'll be talking more about Impact Wrestling right after these messages.
Ride the winds, flying far and soaring like a hawk.
Run a marathon with the endurance of a tiger.
Swim across the ocean like a dolphin.
Beast Energy X. Do you have it in you?
Buy Beast Energy X at all Waffle Max locations and unleash the beast in you.
Join the Beast Energy X fan club and get free perks. Sign up by following us on Twitter at Beast Energy X.
Follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
I'm not finished with you!
And now, let's get back to the show.
Hey everybody, this is Felix The Cat Katlovski, and we're back on Talk Wrestling Live. This is Fear After Dark, and we're still recapping what went down last week on Impact Wrestling. So we were just talking about that match that was scheduled for Rosemary taking on Kiera Hogan. Rosemary had that undead maid of honor on a chain, and eventually Su Yung came to the ring, and she freed the undead maid of honor, and she brought her undead bridesmaids as well. They all ganged up on Rosemary, and Kiera Hogan did nothing. She was thinking about helping out her friend Rosemary, but then she she decided against it. And we don't know whether she was frozen in fear or whether she was having second thoughts. She just decided not to get involved. But that's what went down before we went to break. And now we'll continue from where we left off. So Melissa Santos, Impact Wrestling backstage interviewer, she asked Taya Valkyrie how it felt to retain her Knockouts championship and become the first person to defeat Jordynne Grace at Impact Wrestling during Rebellion. Taya answered it felt amazing, and she mentioned that she beat every single person that Impact management put in front of her. Taya asked who was left and joked that it was Melissa Santos, that the backstage interviewer would be next. But Madison Rayne showed up and checked Taya's facts because Taya hasn't yet beat Madison Rayne, and Madison is now 2-0 against Taya in Impact Wrestling. So Madison pointed out that she should be the #1 contender, and Madison Rayne wanted Taya tonight. So with Taya still scheduled to compete and putting her Knockouts title on the line over the weekend at Code Red on Impact Plus, that event for the month of May, Taya decided not to accept Madison Rayne's challenge that night. Now later we saw Melissa Santos standing near an Impact Wrestling management office. You could hear Taya complaining to management that they try to overwork her just like when her husband was champion. And Taya told management that she wouldn't defend to Madison Rayne that night and that she would bring her lawyers in if they tried to make her defend it. So Taya said that Impact management agreed with her, and Taya said that she's contractually not obligated to defend her Knockouts championship until another 30 days. So she offered Madison to face her in a match next week, which will be this week, but it's not going to be for the championship. So it's a non-title match. So then LAX were backstage and they were celebrating their big tag team title win from Rebellion. LAX beat the Lucha Bros that night, and Santana was counting money while Ortiz was drinking from 2 different containers full of adult drinks. And Ortiz was trying to decide which drink tasted better. Konnan, on the other hand, didn't want LAX to over-party fresh off their title win because LAX were set to defend the titles again over the weekend for Code Red. And after that, they would still have to worry about the North. That's Aligo Ethan Page and Josh Alexander. So Ortiz tried to reassure Konnan that they have everything taken care of and that they were invited to the Rascals' hangout place at their treehouse. And Konnan seemed satisfied with all of this, but he was strict on no partying till LAX took care of all the business. So Konnan took the money, and then he took the drinks, and he went his own way. And just then, Ortiz was about to celebrate again because Ortiz actually handed Konnan a fake drink, and Ortiz still had one of the real drinks in his hand. So then, Konnan came back and grabbed that one too. So now, Ortiz has to buy more. We had our next match, and it was Eddie Edwards versus Phoenix from the Lucha Bros. Once again, Eddie Edwards brought out his kendo stick to the ring. Now, Don Callis brought up how he doesn't think a doctor can fix Eddie Edwards, but maybe a team of mental health professionals could. Don Callis had a point with Eddie Edwards naming his kendo stick Kenny, constantly talking to it as if he's having a conversation. That's just crazy. I mean, Eddie Edwards, he used to be the world champion, and now he's talking to a kendo stick. We've talked about this for a while now. So Eddie Edwards and Phoenix, they shook hands before the match, which was a nice sign of respect between both wrestlers. Eddie Edwards, despite previously becoming an Impact World Champion, he's become a loose cannon lately to the point that the referees are sometimes afraid of him and they won't always disqualify him when he uses weapons in the match. Now, for some reason, Killer Kross showed up during the match and he just kind of stood there at the entranceway with a blank stare on his face. As Eddie Edwards was staying focused on Phoenix, Killer Kross slowly started approaching the ring. As it looked like Killer Kross was going to get in the ring, instead he grabbed Kenny, the kendo stick, and it looked like he was offering it to Eddie Edwards. But instead, Kross and Eddie were grasping to take control of Kenny, the kendo stick. This distracted Eddie Edwards, and it gave Phoenix the opening to hit the super kick on Eddie Edwards. And that's when Phoenix finished off Eddie Edwards with a muscle buster and a pin to get that win over Eddie Edwards. And this is just a good example of when bringing weapons to your own match can cost you the match if you get distracted. When Eddie Edwards got back up, he looked distraught because he couldn't find his friend Kenny the kendo stick. It was Killer Kross that stole it from him. So then we saw Rob Van Dam warming up as he walked down the hallway. We were told that he would be making his way to the ring. Meanwhile, you had Rich Swann. He met up with Tommy Dreamer and they were talking about Sami Callihan. Tommy Dreamer offered his assistance to Rich Swann, saying that if Rich Swann was looking to go to war with Sami Sami Callihan that Dreamer would have Rich Swann's back. Now, if you remember, Sami Callihan was looking to have another OVE rules match against Rich Swann, but he wanted his family to be involved this time in that match, because last time Callihan had an OVE rules match against Rich Swann, and any involvement by OVE would have gotten them all fired. So Rich Swann said he only needs one more man on his team, and suddenly Scarlett Bordeaux showed up, surrounded by smoke. And with Rich Swann looking for a 4-person team, Scarlett heard about the foursome that Rich Swann would have to assemble for his team, and Rich Swann thought Scarlett was implying that she wanted to be the 4th person on the team, and he admitted that he knows that she's a bad girl, and we've seen her take on men like Glenn Gilberti and Rohit Raju, but when preparing for somebody like Sami Callihan, you know it will get violent. Now, instead of Scarlett being the teammate, Scarlett was thinking about something bigger, and that's when she proposed Fallah Bahh would be their partner. So Rob Van Dam made his way to the ring, and fans in Toronto were thrilled to see RVD back in Impact Wrestling. He last competed at United We Stand, teaming with Sabu against the Lucha Bros. RVD said he came back to Impact Wrestling because of who he is. He's seen how he's inspired many wrestlers and how they do his exact moves, and while it's flattering being everyone's hero, you have to remember the guys doing his moves are there for competition. There's a difference between guys imitating RVD's moves and actually being RVD. So this brought out All Ego Ethan Page. Ethan brought several chairs with him, and he wanted to explain himself to RVD before he got any closer. So Page said he brought the chairs to the ring to show RVD another way to use them that RVD never thought of before. So instead of hitting RVD with the chairs or throwing one of them at RVD, Ethan Page set up 2 chairs and simply sat down on one. Now, Ethan offered RVD to just sit down and have a chat with him, but RVD was wondering, who is this guy? Fans chanted All Ego, but Ethan corrected them, giving RVD his first and last name, Ethan Page. Since RVD wasn't going to have a seat, Ethan got more comfortable by resting his legs on one chair while sitting on the other chair. And just then, RVD pulled the chair Page had been resting his legs out from under him, and RVD didn't sit down. He just kind of stood there, leaning against the top of the chair. Now, Ethan Page told Rob that RVD was never his hero, and he never even looked up to him, even once. Now, with Page still sitting in that chair and RVD standing above him, RVD pointed out that Page was literally looking up to him right now. So Ethan Page said RVD clearly never watched one of his matches because Ethan claims he would never do one of RVD's signature moves. And RVD was just so full of himself, claiming that Ethan Page must have had a bucket list to always want to get in the ring with Rob Van Dam. RVD was willing to just get it over with and kick Ethan's butt right now, but Ethan Page thought RVD was feeling too agitated to have a match right now. So Ethan offered to have a match against RVD next week, which will be this week. And just then RVD got All Ego's attention by calling his name, throwing a chair at him, and hitting the Van Daminator after Page caught the chair. So Ethan Page was just hanging upside down from the ring apron as RVD left the ring. And we'll be talking more about Impact Wrestling right after these messages.
Man, this sucks. I can't go to the baseball game because I have to pack. We're moving next week and I have to get enough large boxes.
Did someone say oxes?
No, I said boxes. Ox's boxes are strong like an ox and durable for moving trips.
They're also biodegradable, which is just great for the environment. Download the Ox's Boxes app on your phone today, and your first box is free. And now we're offering same-day deliveries if you order before 4 p.m. on any given business day. Like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter.
Follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
I'm not finished with you!
And now, let's get back to the show.
Hey wrestling fans, this is Felix The Cat Katlovski, and this is Fear After Dark on Talk Wrestling Live. And we were last talking about Ethan Page and his interaction with Rob Van Dam. I believe this was the first time the two had met in Impact Wrestling. Rob Van Dam kind of accused Ethan Page of being another one of the wrestlers who tried to imitate his moves. He said that Ethan Page probably watched him and looked up to RVD growing up, but Ethan Page denied all that. He said that he never looked up to RVD, but then he was sitting in the ring right with him while RVD was standing up, so technically he was literally looking up to RVD. Now, Ethan Page and RVD, they talked about a possible match against the two of them, and it looked like it was going to happen that night, but instead they scheduled a match for the next week. So let's see how Ethan Page's tag team partner from the North, Josh Alexander, how he felt about Ethan Page setting that matchup between Ethan Page and Rob Van Dam. So we saw the North backstage, and Josh Alexander was asking Ethan Page what was he thinking, questioning where his head was by challenging RVD. Ethan Page thought he was doing it to help the North in getting a high-profile match, but really it was only helping Ethan Page, as this would be a singles match. Instead of picking a fight with a legend, Josh Alexander thought the North should have been setting their sights on LAX, the new Impact Wrestling Tag Team Champions. Ethan Page was thinking that Josh didn't think Ethan could do double duty in the same night, taking on RVD in one match and LAX in a second match. But Moose decided that Page could focus on RVD, while Moose and Alexander could deal with LAX. And maybe if they can get the job done, they could hop on a flight to the real LAX in Los Angeles. Josh Alexander wished Ethan Page good luck as they all went their separate ways. And then we saw some recap footage from Rebellion when Tessa Blanchard defeated and retired Gail Kim. Now, although they were bitter foes during their match, there was a lot of respect shown between both Tessa Blanchard and Gail Kim afterwards. They hugged after their match, and it was Gail Kim passing the torch to Tessa Blanchard during Rebellion. Gail said that she didn't come out of retirement to have another match because she missed the in-ring action. Gail did it because she knew Tessa was the biggest star in women's wrestling today, and Gail wanted to be part of Tessa's big moment, and now Gail feels complete and satisfied retiring from her field, professional wrestling. We also saw footage of wrestling legend Tully Blanchard congratulating his daughter and being proud of his offspring as she blossomed into the star that she is now. And watching the match, Tully Blanchard was reminded of his days battling the likes of Chief Wahoo McDaniel and other greats where both combatants gave it their all. And then it was time for the main event match where the number one contender would be announced for a title shot for Brian Cage's Impact Wrestling World Championship. So that match was Pentagon versus Johnny Impact versus Michael Elgin in a three-way matchup. Now, even though Johnny was competing to be the number one contender for Brian Cage's World Championship, because Johnny pulled down the Red X in the Ultimate X match at United We Stand, he's guaranteed an X Division title shot, and Michael Elgin powerbombed Johnny Impact on the side of the ring apron, and then Elgin applied a German suplex to Pentagon, and there was a crazy moment in the match where Johnny Impact did a springboard to the top rope, and then he joined Michael Elgin, who was already applying a superplex from the top rope on Pentagon, but Johnny turned the move into a Tower of Doom. Johnny was at the very bottom, Pentagon was at the very top, and Michael Elgin was in the middle. So Pentagon probably felt the most pain from that move. Either way, all three men were down on the mat after that move. Another cool moment during that match was when Michael Elgin did the T-bone suplex on Pentagon with Don Callis on commentary, saying that Pentagon had been swatted like a fly. And then Michael Elgin tossing Johnny Impact onto Pentagon in a great combination of a move. Johnny Impact couldn't hit the Starship of Pain on Michael Elgin, and this allowed Elgin to hit a monstrous clothesline on Johnny Impact, turning him inside out. Michael Elgin powerbombed Johnny Impact into the turnbuckle, and then Big Mike went for a sit-out powerbomb and scored a pinfall to win the match and become the new number one contender for Brian Cage's Impact World Championship. So moving on to Code Red, which took place on Sunday, May 5th on Impact Plus in partnership with House of Glory Wrestling. The matches were as follows. I won't go through the results, but I'll tell you what matches did happen because I haven't even watched the show yet. So we had Johnny Impact and Taya Valkyrie versus Eddie Edwards and Alicia Edwards. So nice mixed tag match right there. We also had Michael Elgin, and he took on Willie Mack. LAX, Santana and Ortiz took on OVE, that's Dave and Jay Christ, and they also took on the New York Wrecking Crew, that's Smooth Blackmon and Chris Seaton. There was another match with Rich Swann taking on Ace Austin, as well as Trey Miguel from the Rascals, as well as Smiley, Evander James, Man Tequila, and that was to crown the House of Glory Crown Jewel Championship. We also had the Rascals in action, that's Desmond and Zach Wentz. They took on the North, Ethan Page and Josh Alexander, and then Tessa Blanchard teamed up with Violet, take on Scarlett Bordeaux and Sonia Strong. And we also had Moose taking on Ken Broadway. So that's everything I have to recap for Fear After Dark. Up next is Lights Out, where I'll prepare you for what's to come on Impact Wrestling right after these messages.
Spoiled meat? Who has time for that? But with a dehydrator, you can keep it edible.
But I'm a vegetarian. vegetarian. I buy so many vegetables for my family, but each time I open the fridge, it reeks of spoiled food.
Buying fresh vegetables can get expensive, and the shelf life becomes a race to the finish. With Space Fresh X, for only 3 easy payments of $14.95, you can own this appliance and stop buying overpriced tiny bottles of dried vegetables. So what are you waiting for? Call 1-800-S-FRESH-X. That's 1-800-737-3749. Order today. Follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
I'm not finished with you!
And now, let's get back to the show.
Hey wrestling fans, this is Felix The Cat Katlovski, and we're just about to start Lights Out, so let's get Lights Out started right now.
Shut up, 5. A 10 is talking.
I'm surprised you're containing yourself. It's like looking at a work of art, Josh. Scarlett Bordeaux has arrived on Impact Wrestling. Oh my God.
Hey, tell them to cover up. I will not be hot-shamed.
Talk about making an impact.
Make wrestling sexy again.
Scarlett Bordeaux has arrived. And now she's leaving, and it's, oh Lord.
Turn the lights down low, cause it's time for Impact Lights Out.
Hey fans, welcome to Lights Out on Talk Wrestling Live, where I will be getting you prepared for what's coming soon to Impact Wrestling. So, Impact matches and events planned for this week on May 10th, we'll be hearing from the new Impact World Champion Brian Cage, and we'll get an update on Brian Cage's condition after he suffered an injury during his match against Johnny Impact at Rebellion. We also know that the Impact World Tag Team title match will be taking place with LAX the champions defending against the North. That's Moose and Josh Alexander. We also know that Taya Valkyrie will be taking on Madison Rayne in a non-title match. Rob Van Dam will be taking on Ethan Page, and Sami Callihan will have his OVE Street Fight match. It will be OVE, Madman Fulton, and Sami Callihan taking on Tommy Dreamer, Fallah Bahh, Rich Swann, and Willie Mack. So that's everything I have to report about Lights Out. So with that said, that does it for this week's episode of Talk Wrestling Live. Thanks for listening on NorthCoastUnderground.com, where the underground starts with you.
You've been listening to Talk Wrestling Live. Listen live on Mondays at 4 p.m. on NorthCoastUnderground.com.
And follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
Goodbye, and good night, bad. Rest in peace.